I think one of the things that we are is we're doers. So we're not just talkers, and I don't mean anything negative against folks who are consultants or anything like that. But when you really want to talk with people who are actually making a difference and doing the hard work, we do the hard work. I mean, I'm not going to be doing what I'm doing all the time forevermore. So if the organization is going to get stronger, other folks within the organization have to get stronger themselves. They have to be comfortable with the idea of making decisions.
You're listening to the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast, featuring real business owners telling real stories about their real business experiences. Here are your hosts, John Chiappetta and Eric Jorn.
All right, welcome back to Blood, Sweat, and Business. Today on the podcast, we have Scott DeMuth from G2 Revolution. Thanks for coming on the show.
Welcome, Scott.
Good morning, and thank you.
Thanks for having us. So Scott, tell us a little bit about G2. What do they do? How'd they get started? Background?
Wow, okay, so there's a lot there. We started about 15 years ago. We are a specialty recycling company. And when people think about recycling, normally they think about that office bin that has paper in there and maybe some water bottles and things like that in there. We actually do that kind of stuff, but a lot of what we really specialize in are consumer products that you find in retail stores. So you go into one of the chain stores, you go down the cosmetics aisle, or you go down the kitchen cleaner aisle. It's not just the packaging there, but it's what's inside, the chemicals. That's what we deal with. That's different from a lot of other recyclers. So it's not just what's on the outside, but it's also what's on the inside.
Interesting.
So we have to find different ways to handle those chemical type products as well as the packaging.
Interesting. That's different than when you think of recycling, right? We always think about just as you described. It makes me think about so how does that work? So what do you recycle that into?
It depends on the particular item, of course. There are some types of chemicals where we will actually make our own products out of it, so we do that ourselves. And then there are other products where it'll come to us. We might depack it, and so take all that packaging off there, separate it out by type of material or by color or whatever the case might be. And then it will go to a downstream vendor that we have a partnership with, and they will actually use that product or that set of products as ingredients for something that they make.
Interesting.
So some of the stuff that we make ourselves, for example, is we have our own trade names, like we have Sloppy Joe Industrial Wash. So it's something that you can use. It's all recycled soaps and shampoos and things like that we have a proprietary formulation for, and you can use it to clean warehouses and buildings like that. And then we have other products, let's say something with alcohol in it, like perfume. Perfume is very flammable because it has that alcohol in it, and that will go to a downstream vendor, and they will extract the alcohol out of the perfume. And that alcohol gets mixed into E85 fuel. So you go to like the gas station, you'll see the E85 fuel pump.
Yep.
That's where it's going into to help that product.
Interesting.
It makes me think I should wear less cologne. I don't want to be flammable.
So is this expired product? So is this stale product that's on the shelves and a retailer just can't get rid of it, so they send it to you to...
It's a great question. So there are several different ways that we can receive products. Sometimes it may be subject to a recall.
Okay.
So the material has to be gathered up and collected somehow, and then it'll come to us that way. Sometimes it's just expired. There's dated products out there. A great example of that people don't realize is hand sanitizer. Oh. Hand sanitizer is actually dated. And so, we've all been swimming in hand sanitizer for the last several years.
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of hand sanitizer out there in the system, and it does expire. And then what do you do with it? So we get that material. There can be other situations where companies go through line changes, and so they have new improved products. You see that new and improved on there, and so the old stuff is coming off the shelf. And so what do you do with those materials?
Got it. Oh, that's interesting. I never really thought about that. Like, what do you do? I figured it all just went in the dumpster.
Nah, and then you have situations where people they'll try out something like a hair shampoo, and they don't like what it does to their hair. And so you go back to the store, you get your money back, right? You go to that front desk, get your money back. Well, what happens to that product that you used? Well, it doesn't go back on the shelf. It's been opened.
Yeah.
And so returns is another area where we'll get products back in as well, too. And so one of the challenges with that, of course, is that now it's no longer intact. It may be leaking, it may be opened, and so there's special transportation issues and things associated with that and handling such materials.
Wow.
How about medical? Do you deal with that as well?
So we get into like over-the-counter type products. So you go down and you see the Tylenol and you see vitamins and supplements and things like that. We will handle a lot of those materials as well, too. Requires a lot of sorting. It requires some regulatory expertise as well, too, which is one of the things that we bring to the table. There are rules associated with handling these products in a commercial setting. You talk about, I just thought that stuff would go into the garbage, but you can't do that with certain items because it is regulated, and it may be regulated for different reasons. And so we have to know the chemistry of these products. We have to know, can they be put together into the same container, or will that cause some kind of problem? So we have a big compliance group that helps us support all our recycling efforts.
Interesting.
In-house compliance or a third party?
Yes, we have our own. I actually have a licensed professional engineer. I come from a background, environmental engineer, and I've been doing this for about 30 years now.
Okay.
Compliance and auditing for waste disposal as well as other environmental issues. So we have a very strong group there that takes a look at all these. So one of the aspects of when we first start talking to a client, and we do basically, by and large, commercial business type business, so it's business-to-business entities, we talk with the business contact to figure out, well, what do you have? What is the scenario that you're facing? What is your problem that you have? And then we walk through that. Well, how do we get it? How do you have that stuff coming in? How much of it? What kind of stuff is it? And we start mapping out what it looks like, the logistics of it. We call it recycle logistics.
Okay.
And we figure that out. Does it need to come to us via a truck? Can it be mailed in? There's a lot of different ways that these materials can come to us.
That makes sense.
Sounds like you're got a lot of logistics going on there, because you got downstream, you've got things that you do in-house.
Correct.
So what kind of team do you have? How many people?
So we have about 30 salaried staff, and we have about 100 people total in the company.
Okay.
And that's between 3 different locations. 2 of the locations are here in Illinois. We've got our headquarters is in Lake Zurich, and we have a secondary facility in Vernon Hills. And then I have a facility in Northwest Ohio in Findlay.
Oh, wow. Oh,
Okay.
Ohio, that's the most fun state when it comes to payroll regulations.
It's not too bad. New Jersey's just as bad. So Pennsylvania also.
Yeah, those are the states where you've grown a little bit because you got local and village, and it's a whole different.
Well, there's a lot of differences, too, just while on the HR subject, just in general, to managing employees.
Mm-hmm.
Those states, Illinois and Ohio, have very different approaches towards the relationship between employees and your employer. And in Illinois, I would basically generally term it as more employee-friendly or employee-oriented.
Mm-hmm.
And Ohio is a little bit more in the different direction from that, the opposite. And so that's one of the challenges when you're working in multiple states, to figure out how to manage your HR aspects, everything from hiring to retention to benefits, you name it.
Yeah, that's getting really common in today's world, right? Where businesses are forced to hire people from various different states because the talent is distributed, and remote work has made that more of a possibility. But now you introduce a new complexity, like you said, is dealing with the different state laws, right? And who, like, what state is more friendly from an employer versus an employee standpoint, and how do you manage that? And I know a lot of companies essentially end up setting their standard at what is the most employee-friendly state require, and it's kind of a cost of looking to hire an employee in a much more employee-friendly state. For us in Illinois, not as big of an issue because we are an employee-friendly state. There's a lot of regulations in what we have to provide. Other states do have similar things. New York, Colorado are both two states in which are very employee friendly as well. But Illinois is up there. So for us here, it's a little bit easier. For companies in other states, you could be, say, in maybe Tennessee, where it's very employer friendly, and hiring here in Illinois. And now you just created a whole new problem for yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that even gets down to things like some states have legalized marijuana, for example. It may seem like an odd example, but the fact of the matter is that there's certain employee rights around that, because in some states you're allowed to use it recreationally. And so how do you handle that in your employee policies?
That's interesting.
And drug testing and things associated with that.
Yeah, as we've seen, so I think your business has a good amount of a good mix of talent in which it needs to support the model, right? You have people that are kind of on the ground floor that are handling things, and then you have people in the administrative side. With the, essentially, I'll call it the talent war that's happened recently, how's that affected staffing for your business?
Well, certainly great resignation on all that out there, right? So I think the talent pool, getting in the pile of resumes has definitely been leaner over the last couple of years. A lot of folks got used to sort of working on their own or working in their remote situation, and the idea of coming into work at some entity in an office, it's sort of a challenging idea at this point. I think for some folks who've gotten used to a little bit more independence. We've certainly seen some of the impacts of that. One of the great things, though, for our company is because of our mission and what we're about, it's very exciting for a lot of folks who want to come to us because they feel passionate about that. We did an employee survey recently, and regardless of any of the other questions and answers that were in it, certainly one thing came across very clearly is everybody is on the mission at the company. Everybody feels we want to succeed. We want to make a difference in the world. We want recycling to go well. And so that's a very nice advantage to have in your corner. Some businesses struggle with that culturally. Why are we here? Why are we doing what we're doing? They don't trust management, that they have their hearts in the right place and stuff. We don't have to worry about that. We know what we're about.
So what do you think that you did maybe different than other companies to instill that cultural baseline? I think environmentally you've got something as an advantage. They're doing something for environment. But other than that, you're got to be doing something different that you're keeping your employees on that path.
Well, you can be challenged at times as an organization to make sure that you're always doing the right thing. And one thing that we have always been very careful about is that we try to really not oversell ourselves. We're not a silver bullet for every situation out there. We don't get into a situation where, you're doing the classic sort of stereotypical sales things like, hey, we can take care of it. We try and stay away from that. We want to really go into the details, go into the weeds of your situation, and we'll tell you if it's going to be difficult, or if there's a particular state or jurisdiction that's going to cause a problem for you. We will say that up front. We will be very honest about that. And I think that has translated through everything that we do. And I think it gives us a very real feeling. We're genuine about that. We will tell you what we can and can't do, and people have a tendency to trust that. And so our employees appreciate that because they don't get put onto an edge and have to oversell something that is not real.
That's good. That's good when it sounds like you've avoided the friction between your sales and your operations function.
Oh, I don't know if we've avoided
that. Well,
I think that is always there.
Yeah.
And particularly when you have what I consider an A team, my team, when you have strong talent and strong personalities, you'll always have some of that friction that's there. And I think that's good. That's okay. That gets you to a better place. It gets you to a better result, ultimately, having different opinions in the room. We fight hard sometimes with each other. I'm not going to kid you. We can have some very strong debates and arguments in that. But once we get to a decision point whether it's me or somebody else in the organization with that authority, then everybody's going to get on that train.
Totally.
And then we say, okay. And importantly, if somebody's done something wrong, you have to be very forgiving about the situation. People know that it's okay to make a mistake. People know that it's okay to do something that didn't work out. All right? You try to take the emotions out of that, and you say, okay, fine, now how do we get out of this mess? And we just figure that out then at that point. So people have permission to fail. In fact, I tell new folks when they come in, it's always exciting when you see bright and bushy, new faces. Everybody's ready to go. And then they say, just to let you know, in my first meeting with them, I always say is like, you're going to fail here. and then they look at you and they're like, what? It's like, no, just to let you know, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
It's okay, though.
It's okay.
It's okay. That's how you're going to learn things, because you're not going to get it all right. I still make mistakes.
Yep.
So
Sure.
you can make mistakes. You just got to fix it. You got to acknowledge it, fix it, own it, and then we move on from there.
I love that. I mean, I tell new staff all the time, I've screwed up about anything you can screw up here in my career. And it just happens. And that's how you learn, right? The key is don't keep making the same mistake. You got to learn from your mistakes. And there's no better way to learn than either learn from your success or from a mistake that you have. And then this is the right path to go down.
What you're looking for is when people make mistakes, they acknowledge it, and the light bulb goes on, and they say, okay, I get what I did wrong with this. And that's what you're looking for. And then they apply that knowledge to the next scenario, and they start getting it. And it takes a while sometimes. Even though on the surface it may look like, hey, this is just a recycling company, there's a lot of layers to this onion. And it really is a very complex business when it comes down to it. We've talked about the HR aspects, a little bit about the logistics and that, but it's like every other larger company out there. There's IT issues, there's cross-pollination between different departments and things like that. And that all has to work very well together. And that can be challenging. That's why I say that friction can be there at times. It's just how you work through that friction is the key thing. And you don't hold it against anybody. You don't personalize it. You just work through the problems, and you can get to that better decision then in the future.
How hands-on are you? Or do you have somebody underneath that you kind of let the problems filter to before they get to you? Or
Well, I fortunately have a very good situation with some great folks under me. My executive staff, a couple ladies are very good at what they do operationally and sales-wise, and they work through a lot of the issues. But at the end of the day, I'm kind of a hands-on kind of guy. I want to see what's going on. I want to see it with my own eyes. And so, for example, where this translates into practice is when we have new, more complex type of recycling situations with certain commercial customers, we'll try and map those recycling programs into our Lake Zurich location. Why? Because we got our executive team, we've got our IT runners, we got everybody there that can really see, our leadership folks can really see it firsthand with our own eyes and troubleshoot through anything that might come up on that. So I do get involved with it. I try really hard to not say too much. I'm trying very hard at this point to not get involved in every little thing. And because I will say things and with the strength of my voice, it can drown out other people's voices, and so I have to be careful about that.
I'm actively trying to do the same thing. I say, Eric, shut up, shut up, stop talking. Let other people grow. Because really that's, if you're not doing that, you're in a way hindering their growth.
That's correct. I mean, I'm not going to be doing what I'm doing all the time forevermore. So if the organization is going to get stronger, other folks within the organization have to get stronger themselves. They have to be comfortable with the idea of making decisions, and decisions that may have consequences business-wise. And they have to get used to that failure like we talked about and things like that. And if you don't give people that space to do that, it always just comes back to you. It's like, what do you want to do, Scott? What do you want to do, Scott? And you have to get out of that mode and let the rest of the organization take that weight.
That's so smart.
It also helps with innovation, right? I mean, you don't have all the ideas that could possibly exist in the world, so your new talent kind of should, in theory, would bring in some of that innovation.
Absolutely. The days of me writing up every proposal and writing up every solution are long gone at this point. I have to rely on other people whom I trust to put their best talents and efforts towards identifying ways to do things and those innovations you talk about, and then figure out how to implement those within the company. So, I have a tendency to say these days, I'll put in my 2 cents worth if you ask me. I will properly look at something. I take it seriously if you ask for my opinion. I'm kind of known for redlining things and when you go through a document and putting the old, red marker on it kind of thing. Yeah. But you ask my opinion. I'm just giving you my suggestions. I take it seriously what you've sent to me. So you decide what you want to do with it once I've given you my edits.
Totally.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's huge, though. I think if anybody's going to take the next step in their business evolution, trusting your employees is probably the first step.
You really have to. The organization doesn't work well if everything's done at the top. I mean, It just doesn't get done. And like I said, other people have to get stronger, and the organization has to be able to fundamentally work without you being there because you may be involved in other issues and things or doing podcasts or whatever. So, it's got to work.
Totally. Yeah, it's definitely a challenge, especially as you go through change and evolution as an organization. It's hard for leadership to essentially let go and let the staff do that. How do you guys, or I'm assuming based on your discussion around culture, you have strong core values, mission, vision. How did you guys as a leadership team come up with those and launch that to your staff?
Well, I have the great fortune of having worked for the gentleman who's the owner of the company. We're old friends, and we've known each other a very long time, and we share very similar vision and values on that. And so ultimately, a few years back, he turned the company over to me. So I consider that sort of a sacred duty on my part to keep running the company. He put his trust into me to make it grow and make it be successful. And so I carry that sort of sacred duty, as I said, over to everybody else within the organization to make sure that we are all on that same page. And again, like I said before, you can fight like cats and dogs to figure out things, but once that train has left the station, everybody's got to be on board with it. You got to go in a certain direction, for better or for worse. Now, having said that, if new data comes in or you find, hey, something's not working, we thought it was X, but it's really Y, then we will switch directions in that. And so I have to always be open to that. And I have been very willing to admit, hey, I made the mistake, guys. I own this one when things like that have come up at times. But it is one of those things where you want to have a leadership team. When you talk about that, I have a small group of folks who we meet weekly, basically, and go through the issues in general, the company, new things that are coming up and stuff like that. And so I need to hear those other voices, like I said, to be able to understand what's going on in the company and, frankly speaking, sometimes be challenged.
Okay.
Stuff.
Definitely. So we, as a firm, we run on EOS, which is similar to what you described. Leadership team meets once a week. We discuss issues. We set company rocks, goals. And then we have our action items or to-dos every week. And it's generally a very healthy discussion. We challenge each other. It's an open forum. You're always allowed to express your opinion. And I think that's super helpful when you have a group of people that come together that do that.
Yeah, and one of the learnings that I've had over my career is I think I started as someone who was sort of a command and control type, and that was just how I was brought up through the system in previous positions. And to turn around and to devolve that and delegate things out is sort of a newer territory later in my career. And that takes a little bit of a trust and faith to do that. And So people may not look at that as a pretty big deal, but when you're a person in charge of an organization, it is a big deal. I'm entrusting you with running with something. Now, the trick these days is to get employees who understand that, hey, once it's in your lap now you got ownership. Now it's all on you. You got to run with that. You got to take responsibility for that. And sometimes I think it comes up where folks aren't sure of what does this really mean. And so it's important to always give the lifeline.
Mm-hmm.
So I have folks that get into projects and then they start sort of swaying in the water. They can't figure out what's the next step. And so I always say, if you got any questions, you come back in. I've got an open door.
Yep.
Let's talk this thing through. I like to use the whiteboard, which sounds very traditional. It's very technological kind of thing, but I like to think through as I'm writing and write things out on the board and walk through it. And for me, it's just the visual aspect of it. It's the act of actually writing the notes, the old college thing of writing it down. It helps me think through it better and memorize it and things like that. So I like going through those scenarios. As an engineer by training and degree, I always look at problems by breaking them down into their component parts. And so you just write out all those parts, and then you try and synthesize then at that point what you want to do going forward.
I think that makes sense. So way back when into high school, I was sure I wanted to go into engineering. And then I took my first CAD class, and I said, ooh, I don't think this is for me.
You wanted Excel instead.
Well, I was always good at math, so I figured I'd maneuver into something that's also math-oriented. Actually, accounting, I saw the most amount of people start and the least amount of people end in that class. And I said, hey, this might not be a bad thing. But how you described how you need to work through things, I think very similar to that, where I have to take all the little components, write them down, and then I can draw the lines that connect them into this is how I get my solution. I think that is a very engineer way of thinking about things.
Yeah, it's also sometimes you can have really big projects or really big problems, and they just look tremendous. And if you break them down into little pieces, and then you can work on those little pieces, you get those small victories. Like you figure out this little aspect or that little aspect, and then you turn around and you say, see, we're getting somewhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so those small steps can not make it seem like such a big challenge.
Totally. Yeah, that's a good.
I like that.
I really like that perspective.
Actually, I like that a lot. I try to do, honestly, if with I'm in clients, I think I try to do the same thing, break it down. I mean, most clients don't understand the accounting, and they have a difficult time understanding a financial statement maybe or whatever the case might be. And until you break it down, and next thing you know, their understanding is beyond what they ever thought they would ever get to. So I think that's actually a real cool idea.
So when you said that the whiteboard might not be that technological, so they have this thing now called Remarkable. And I think it's like a $500 tablet that you can write on. It's supposed to feel just like writing on paper.
Yes.
Yeah. And I was at a conference a couple weeks ago. I swear half the people had them, and I'm like, they literally made a business, probably a very profitable business out of making a digital legal pad. So it's not that.
It also uploads.
Yeah, it uploads it fixes the one problem with a legal pad is where you put the legal pad somewhere or you store it away, and then you can't. You got to go dig through the notes. You can go digitally search them. So it solved a very good problem, but writing things out is not that non-technological, I guess. Give yourself a little bit more credit.
Well, it's just again, you take what you learn over time, and I've just always found that writing it out, I think it's just the way that my brain works.
Yep.
And getting all those pieces together really makes it less of a beast at the end of the day, and you can go through it piece by piece, so it doesn't feel like such a large challenge to you.
I've got a question on that, because I write stuff down, and it's all for retention. I almost never will go back and look at what I wrote down again unless it's a very specific fact that I can't remember. But is that kind of how you do it too, is you're writing it as you're taking in the information, you writing it creates the retention.
Yeah, in fact, in my office, I have a lot of Post-it notes. Okay, it's a great invention. Okay, I don't care what anybody says.
You don't have your password on top of your computer, right?
right. Just gotta watch for that one. But I do. When I hear things, or when somebody comes to my office and is talking with me, I'll listen to what they're saying, and then they will say something in particular. I'm like, ooh, and I'm going to write that down right now on a Post-it note so I don't forget that. That's important, really important. So, so I kind of Post-it note manage myself quite a bit.
Okay.
And then it's great when I can cross it off, and then I kind of, I
Toss
can
it.
recycle that. Yeah. Recycle.
Or recycle it. Yeah, good point. Well, if you walk around our office, we don't have garbage cans for everybody. Everybody has recycling bins.
If you walk around our warehouses, there's no dumpster.
Yeah, that's
we
cool.
are certified zero to landfill. So you can take a drive around any of our facilities. There's no dumpster out there. Everything has to find a home that is not the landfill.
That's cool. That just shows how you guys are really embodying your mission, right? Because it's easier to just toss stuff.
Yeah, I mean, some things can be difficult or can be anomalies, and and those can be challenging to figure out a solution to those. But one of the things also is that we made a concerted effort over the last few years to not just say that ourselves, but to actually hire third-party folks to certify us.
Oh.
So it isn't just us saying that. We're not greenwashing. You hear that term out there a lot these days. It's somebody else who's coming in who has the credentials and is looking at everything that we do, including our downstream operations with other partners, and they turn around and they say, yes or no, you guys are doing this thing, the way that you've said. So we have a check on ourselves for that.
It gets pretty nitty gritty, like down to where they, the person that works on this for Scott, actually asks for all the receipts from all the credit cards and expense reports to calculate the total gas and mileage and everything on that.
Wow.
Yeah, carbon. It's all about carbon these days. So here we go, right?
Wow, that gets very in depth.
Yes.
But, right, hey, that's your mission.
Walk the walk.
Yeah, exactly. You're walking the walk. I mean, so some of us are something called Profit First Certified based off a book. And we run our firm on Profit First as well because we want to walk the talk. So similar fashion, right? We're in the finance field, so we adopted a financial methodology and we walk the talk on it. Talk the walk. Right.
Transparency.
Talk the walk,
Yeah.
whatever.
Transparency is a big deal in this. Recycling lately has been a little bit of a challenging industry to operate in.
Mm-hmm.
People are questioning what happens to the stuff when I throw it in that recycling bin, what really goes on, where does it end up?
Yep.
And so I think it forces all of us in this industry to work harder at making sure our operations are indeed appropriate and meet expectations for our customer base, as well as the public in general, ultimately. And so having those kinds of reviews and audits of your processes are very important, I think, these days. I think the old days of just saying, we'll take care of it. We'll take the blue bin from you, and then woof, it disappears off. Oh, yeah, it's been recycled. I think those days are rapidly disappearing.
That's good.
In favor of a more robust approach. And one of the things that we bring to the table is a very data-oriented type process. So when you give us materials in a truck or one of our recycling containers gets mailed back to us, we have barcodes on all that material. We know where it's come from. We know when it's been in shipping. We know how much material. We know the weights. We do all that at our sorting stations. So you get this robust data from us that tells you, yes, you recycled X amount of material.
That's cool.
And then we're transparent. We can show you where everything has gone. You're welcome to come to our facility and see the operations when you're a customer, so you can see your stuff on the floor and where that's going, and then see the paperwork where it's ultimately going to end up if we're not doing it as the end point. So you can trace that whole thing out and see that chain of custody on those materials.
I think that's where the big I don't know, how do you say it, recycler to consumer or to the individual, to the public. I think that's where they're failing, is there's not enough transparency. And that's why people are questioning, what happens when I throw something in my recycling bin at home. And
one of the good things about business to business is we get an opportunity to have a very personal contact type of relationship with our clients. These are people that we know the difficulties and situations that they are in on the corporate side of things. We've been there ourselves. I've been on the corporate side for years, so I understand the kinds of issues that they have, particularly, for example, retail. Retail, you're talking about hundreds, maybe thousands of stores in all these states, and you're just trying to keep your stores running and have good sales in that. And then you have these environmental issues that come into the picture. Well, how can we help you with that? And then we can develop that very personal relationship with our clients and really seek to meet those needs that they have. So that's a fun aspect, actually, of this, is getting to learn about these different clients and their particular unique issues. Because you think all these chain stores, for example, and that's a big part of our customer base, you think that they're all the same on some level, but they're so unique from each other. They have so many different little nuances and how they do their logistics, what they will sell on the shelf, what they won't, and why they don't, kind of thing. And it changes all the time. We're talking about the holidays right now. Well, all these stores are getting ready for the holidays. They're all stocked up. They got new products in the stores. So our world is always very exciting, and there's no rust here.
Yeah.
Okay, it's always challenging because there's always new products that are coming in the mix, things that we've never seen before, or different variations of things that we've seen before that are always coming into it. And so it's exciting for us to always look at it and you say, oh, what the heck is that? And, try and figure out the solution to that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's actually what you described sounds a lot like what I get the most reward of what we do is when we get to learn and understand about a business and their nuance and how they operate. And, who would have thought that a specialty recycler would be this large enterprise? And then you see that and you're like, okay, it all makes sense, right? Here's a problem that almost every retailer has, and we found a solution for it and created a market for it. And to me, that's one of the most fascinating things we do. And I'm glad that our firm is in a way in which we are more business oriented versus, I guess we'll call it tax and accounting oriented, where, a lot of times you're used to just, here's all our stuff, now spit out a tax return or spit out a financial statement. We really want to take the time to understand the business, because I think at the end of the day, we provide a better product that way.
Yeah, we definitely, one of the other things that really influences our business is state laws can change. And so you think the operating environment, and then something changes out there.
Yep.
And now you got to adjust your business accordingly, just like any other business, whether it's tax law or whatever. And so then we see a situation where we get the compliance team on it. We have to come up with a new potential pathway towards recycling products in the given state, because now they've said, well, you really can't do it that way anymore. Now you got to do it a different way. And so then we have to somehow integrate that into all of our customer base that's operating within that jurisdiction. So it's a very real challenge that can come in. And again, it can be very exciting. That gives my compliance folks a chance to sort of geek out and look at all those new regulations and stuff.
I find interesting is the transparency that you're trying to push out, but the systems involved to develop that transparency. I don't know what you're like, if you're using some specific software or that kind of thing. The implementation of that alone is probably daunting in itself.
This is actually a really cool thing, I guess, that you could talk about. That they made their own.
Yeah, so we have a proprietary system called EcoTrack, and it basically is the core operating area for our data. And then there's portals that go off of that. So whether internally or you as a client, you can get your data through a portal to get into that. We call it My Eco. And you can look at all your containers. You can look at all your locations, stores, warehouses, industrial facilities, whatever it is, and see all the containers, all the shipments that you've sent and when it occurred. You can get certificates of recycling. A lot of folks like to have sort of a backup document that tells them, hey, I sent 1,000 pounds of stuff to you and it was recycled, and we will warranty that with a recycling certificate back to the customer on there, so they can download that information as well. But that system started as a very small thing and has become an interesting proprietary software monster at this point that does a lot of different things for us. We can also put in your compliance documents in there and things like that. If you've got reporting as a recycler, sometimes we have to provide reports to state agencies and things like that, so we'll put that in the system as well.
That's actually really cool.
That is cool.
You could get a bunch of engineers together. They guys come up with a good system.
I'm very fortunate to have a very strong internal IT area. The guys do a great job for us. They are committed to our purpose, and they work very hard. And in a complex sort of operating environment, getting your IT right is very critical. You know, I've been in organizations where an IT project comes up and it might take a year for it just to get into the budget cycle or something like that.
Yep.
These guys will come into it and they'll look at the issue, they look at it as a challenge, and they will bang it out. They will figure out a solution for it. So always very happy and very proud that we've got that in-house to be able to do that.
Yeah, that's huge. When they're bought in and they understand the mission, right, and you have that alignment between what they, because normally you have a lot of segregation between different functions and then the operating core of the business. And it really, when you have them integrated like that, it turns it into a strategic advantage, right? Where you can use IT as a propeller versus, a must-have.
I mean, any given day there can be shipping questions that come up. FedEx or UPS might change something in their process, and so IT has to be right on it to be able to adjust client programs to be able to adjust to those changes that they make, for example.
Totally.
Yeah, we collaborated with your IT team and created a solution to. It's probably between 10 and 15,000 invoices that get issued to one of the customers a month.
Wow.
And we do it very quickly. Like, I don't know. It'd probably be interesting to quantify the savings if we had done it with a legacy process on that one. But and we're going to continue to be involved to go down that path with some of the other processes, because it's like you said, they're a great team. It's nice to have those guys in your corner that can create I call it the IT wizardry that we just are not,
Yeah.
I'm a bean counter.
So we're getting close to the end of the year. From your perspective, obviously we're very versed with year-end planning and looking at what the next year is going to bring. What does that process look like for you? And I'm assuming that's something the two of you are working together on quite a bit.
We do go through a budgeting process. That's something that was introduced more recently, and we're sort of fine-tuning that at this point. And so all the different parts of the company go through sort of what do we see is going to happen in the next year? What is that budget potentially going to look like? That gets all consolidated and then run up through a central budgeting process that then is tracked on a regular basis. And by and large, I think that's provided a certain level of discipline into the system. Folks have gotten kind of more used to it now. This is one of those things that when you're a smaller company, you're so much into the fighting the fires and things like that the thought of just budgeting down the road 2, 3, 4 years just doesn't really come into the picture.
Yep.
But now, as you've gotten to be a more mature organization, you start putting some parameters and controls around certain things, and you have folks on the finance side that are looking for, well, so what do you see as the future? And so you want to give them good, consistent information. So that's been a big change in the last couple of years. And I think it's been a good improvement, because one of the things that we're getting towards is dashboarding a lot of business information, and dare I say it, the whole AI kind of thing, how to integrate that into business as well too, then going forward. So if you've got that data, now you can start manipulating that, do some decision support and things like that you couldn't do in the past.
Yeah, that's what's fascinating about AI. Not necessarily, if you don't operate with the fear that it's going to take your job, but instead, it's a tool. I mean, it's going to be a tool that allows any business to propel itself, because it allows you to be more forward looking instead of trying to.
They're the most knowledgeable macro builder I know.
ChatGPT. So when you're created inside of the budgeting process, you're having each one of your groups then create their budget for their department. And then that's all rolling forward together. Are you meeting individually with each department, or somebody owns that?
The biggest one that I spend time with is sales.
Yeah.
Because sales has the sales budget, which, everything else is kind of dependent on how that runs.
Yeah.
And then they also have their own expense budget.
Mm-hmm.
So they have two bigger components of the whole budgeting process. So a lot of assumptions get built off of sales.
Yep.
And so what do you spend the most time on is sales.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, again, I have a really strong sales team that knows what they're about, and they are very much aligned on mission. And so it's nice to be able to have a straightforward conversation. I think sometimes, particularly in the sales area, folks can get afraid of the numbers, and well, where's the number going to be at? And they feel like that, now they're beholden to the numbers. And the key thing is having an open line of communication. Like, look, what is it realistically? What is the real likelihood of this or that happening, and assigning that percentage to it? And as long as you have a very upfront conversation with your sales team, and you have to be honest about it. That things may happen. There's can be twists and turns. Clients come into the picture. You talk about things. The sales cycle goes on. You have a sales funnel. Some things just don't work out. Some things do work out and go further along in that funnel. And so, as long as you start with that basis of trust, and you get that honest sort of estimate as to what's going to happen and what's not going to happen, I think it works out very well. It's when you try to sort of play the numbers game that I think that becomes a problem. And it just, we've always been very straightforward on it. What's it really going to look like? And so, like I said, I have a great sales team that understands that. Again, they know they can fail, and it's just part of the business conversation at that point.
Totally.
We meet with them quarterly too, to just go over, how does it look versus what we guessed, what went wrong, what's upcoming, so we can adjust if it's needed, and Scott could then adjust his operation, because if he doesn't, then he's, there's potential he could go in understaffed or overstaffed, right?
Yep. Yeah. No doubt. I mean, I wear the sales hat for a firm, and with that, I try to keep things simple. If we want to grow by an X amount of revenue or client count, whatever it is, I know what our cost of acquisition is. So that's how I set my budget, is essentially, here's this, here's that, and here's how we're going to, and then I go into the weeds and divide it up on how we're going to spend that money to achieve that sales goal. And, fortunately for me, I also work in operations and run operations to a certain extent. And we don't have as much. We still have obviously the friction because I want to bring in as much new business as we possibly can. Yet at the same time, I also know from even my personal experience how painful it can be when you don't have the right resources to deliver on that client inflow.
We used to have a phrase we called servicing the madness.
Yes.
And there's always that give and take between sales and operations, and sales is the tip of the spear.
Yep.
They're out there. They got to develop a thick skin. They can get a lot of rejection and things like that they have to cope with, and so they're strong warriors. And then we have on the operations side of the picture, it comes in the door. It's going to be a good business risk from our perspective, a good business value and opportunity, but you still got to figure out how to do it. Mm-hmm. And so there's always nuances. There's always different ways to invoice something. There's always different customer service needs in terms of questions that come up or whatever the case is. And so the operations team has to then turn around and figure out how, to do all those little pieces and to get that stuff out the door when it's supposed to get out the door. And again, been very fortunate that the operations team understands the dynamic aspects of our business. What we do this year is not the same as what we did 2 years ago, kind of thing, and that just goes, it's par for the course for us.
Yeah, definitely. It's always something that you have to keep in perspective. Is a new client or new customer is going to take you a lot more time than it is to continue servicing an existing customer, because there is that learning process. Right. There's that diagnostic process, the coming up with the systems and the processes to service them properly, and it just takes a lot more time.
Yeah, one of the exciting possibilities down the road from a data perspective, and people have talked about data mining and things like that, and now throwing in the AI on top of it to really get deeper into what are really the findings, and not to say anything bad about folks here in terms of Excel spreadsheets and things like that. But, an Excel spreadsheet is just a spreadsheet. Okay, yep. It's just a lot of numbers that's on there, and that somebody or something has to look at it and say, well, what's the conclusion? What is this thing telling me?
Yep.
And so that's the art of it. When you have as much data as what we have, how granular it gets, then you got to pull back and say, well, so what does this mean? What is the participation that customers are doing? What are their goals that they're trying to meet? What metrics should we be looking at versus what we are looking at? And I think that's really the art of the business then going forward. So you have this technical aspect. You got to get that data and figure out where does it come from and all that. But then you got to turn around and translate. What does that mean?
Yeah.
And then you got to rely on your sales team to sort of translate the technical into normal
executable. Exactly.
Let the client know tactfully what's going on, good or bad.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a very basic use of that is, what's your ideal customer or client profile look like? And right now, we kind of, to a certain extent, we kind of guesstimated it, right? A lot of that's off gut feel. I'm hoping that AI provides us with the opportunity to say, this is who's going to bring us the most staff satisfaction, client satisfaction, and profitability, all three. And whatever intersects all those three things is now our ideal client profile. And that's who we want to service and who I want to then train my sales and marketing team to go find us in the marketplace. And that's, to me, that'll be a game changer for us, even just that one step.
And one of the things from our perspective is the dynamics of all the clients. First of all, as retail, again, a big piece of who we work with, it's a seasonal business.
Yep.
Okay, you've got Black Friday and all that going on in the Christmas season. Then there's parts of the year where it's slower.
Mm-hmm.
And you have other times of the year where then you kick up, like back to school sales and things like that. And so you have this dynamic thing that happens during the course of the year. So your assumptions at other points of the year don't necessarily hold. And then you got to sort of replan actually everything.
Yep.
Numbers-wise and otherwise on that. So you may have a customer that's great at one point of the year, but actually somebody else is better at a different point of the year.
Yeah, that's a great point. That advanced analytics every business, I think, deals with those ebbs and flows of seasonality and that smoothing
Yeah, if you could predict that, fantastic, and adjust your operations and everything accordingly.
Yeah, definitely. All right, I think we're nearing the end of the podcast. Anything else that you want to add? Anything that you think stands out as, what does G2 do that makes it stand out from its competition, just business in general? What's a real difference maker?
Well, I think one of the things that we are is we're doers. So we're not just talkers, and I don't mean anything negative against folks who are consultants or anything like that. But when you really want to talk with people who are actually making a difference and doing the hard work, we do the hard work. We have to figure out how to sort things out. We have to figure out how to depack products. And not everybody's really into that. It's dirty. Now I do offer a clean operating environment, air conditioned, things like that, for employees, well lit and that. I mean, you walk into our facilities, it's beautiful, and they love it, and that's why they love working for us. But at the end of the day, you still sometimes you will get into these products and things that are leaking, they're damaged, and they have problems. And so I really appreciate and want to shout out to all those folks who are on the floor doing the actual processing work. They're the ones that really make this happen. And I respect the hard work that they do. They come in, they're there all day long, going through all these different products and things. I mean, I can't teach a robot to do that stuff. They can look at these products and they know exactly what it is, and they can sort it properly from that perspective. And that's just hard. I've had people come in, technology type folks, and look at things. They said, nah, you know what? Your people are still better at this than where we're at with stuff. And so kudos to the team on the floor at our facilities, because they do a fantastic job for us and make the magic happen.
Awesome. Well, I love the mission, love the organization. I really appreciate all the insights that you brought to us today. Listeners, think about G2 for your recycling, your commercial recycling needs. And also, when you're thinking about recycling in general as an individual, think about a little bit what we talked about today and the benefits that could take for the environment as a whole. Other than that, Scott, thanks so much for being on the show.
Awesome.
And listeners will tune in next time. You have been listening to the Blood, Sweat, and Business podcast. You can hear more real stories from real business owners about what it takes to make it in business by subscribing to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. If you like what you hear, leave a review and a 5-star rating. This podcast has been brought to you by Kaizen CPAs and Advisors, providing advisory and accounting services to help you grow your business. Learn more at kaizencpas.com.